Welcome everybody. Sorry we're a little bit late joining, some technical issues, but welcome to RAC's first F-gas question time extra time, which is a chance to ask more questions about the F-gas legislation and refrigerant choice. We're grateful to Wolseley for sponsoring this event, which has allowed us to assemble another panel of experts from across the supply chain to discuss the hot topics around bans, refrigerant choice, compliance, EN 378, lockdown, you name it. That's what it's all about, question time. So we're delighted to welcome our panelists, Robert Franklin and Peter Woods of Wolseley, who provide the wholesaler's perspective, refrigerant expertise, hopefully joining us soon in the shape of John Ormerod of AGAS, the manufacturer's viewpoint with John Broughton of Danfoss Cooling, and last but by no means least, resident F-gas guru, Graham Fox of RAC. What it is, this event is question time stripped down to its basics. So we're having an opening presentation, and then it's straight over to the panel for discussions and audience questions. You can send your questions at any time, and we'll do our best to answer them. So please do keep them as short and clear as possible. We've already got some questions sent in to us, so we've got a few things to talk about, but we can't have a question time without questions. This is our first time on the Zoom platform, so please do bear with us if there are any technical hitches. That's the intros over. So let's go straight over to Robert Franklin for his presentation.
Thank you, Andrew. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for organising the event, Andrew, and giving us the opportunity to talk again about F-gas and the many, many questions that I'm sure we have. So without further ado, I'll get started. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was what our areas of focus are in the climate business at Wolseley. What are we doing? What's the most important topics at the moment? Clearly, we've been working in some very difficult times, but I'm pleased to say it's business as usual now. All our branches are open. So what are the areas of focus for us with F-gas at the moment? There's a number of them, and I'll try to cover the most important ones today. The first one is how we're supporting compliance and how we're managing the sale of products both in branch and online. And secondly, and obviously, is refrigerants, the alternatives, reclaim, and the many choices of new refrigerants coming to the market, and A2Ls in particular, which we'll talk about. And thirdly, new equipment. This is going to be a complicated changeover. The AC split changeover was fairly straightforward and driven by the manufacturers with only one choice of refrigerant. Refrigeration is going to be far more complicated, and managing the changeover in ranges is going to present its own challenges in how we choose to change what and when as new product becomes available. So we'll be managing that changeover very carefully over the coming months. But I'm also pleased to say we're already producing packs in our custom build facility on A2Ls, a major achievement for Peter and the team there. And last but not least, EN 378, safety and technical support. Now I'm going to leave this to the expert, so Peter will talk about this later in his section. And then going back to the beginning of this year, we also introduced Reclaim R404, which is the first step of the changes in legislation that have recently happened. So supporting compliance is the first item on the agenda, and at Climate we're kept busy supporting compliance. It's a major topic and something we need to get right. We do have a really robust process in place to manage the sale of refrigerants and pre-charged equipment to our customers. Our system holds our customer F-gas registration records, and we'll also be using an API gateway to keep those records up to date digitally real time soon. To ensure we can only sell refrigerant and pre-charged equipment to customers who are registered, a sale cannot be completed on our branch systems unless customers are registered. Recently, we've seen a big increase in online ordering with recent events. Another area we have to manage very carefully. Orders can be placed with us until 8 o'clock at night for products in our express delivery range for next day delivery, which is great. But selling online is another area we have to have procedures in place to ensure we only sell refrigerant and pre-charged equipment to customers who are registered. So our website clearly identifies products that require F-gas registration and is locked down. Orders can only be completed online for products that require F-gas certification by customers that are correctly set up and F-gas registered on our systems. So an important area, and we've seen a lot of change in that area recently. And staying with the subject of compliance, this is my favourite subject. I've long held a belief that the use of refrigerants and the whereabouts of a cylinder should really be linked right from the time of the purchase, and it's been a mystery for many years where all the cylinders that disappear have gone. So I'm absolutely delighted to confirm today that we are launching a new and completely free to use F-gas cylinder management app during the course of this month. This is a new and free to use online tool, and helped in its development by AGAS, who support the platform. It's Wolseley branded, and it brings together the purchase of refrigerant with its use, as well as the aging of cylinders, and will be updated throughout the day, 4 times a day. So if you buy a cylinder in the morning and you return it in the afternoon, at the end of the day, the system will update and show the status of that cylinder. The most important point, and the reason for mentioning this today, is the app will include a full and comprehensive F-gas reporting tool that complies with all reporting requirements and available on a mobile and desktop version, making it really easy for all of our customers to capture and manage their F-gas reporting requirements, and also provide their customers with useful reporting. So moving on to the complicated subject of new refrigerants and what the options are, and there are very many. The really good news is we do still have until 2030 to use reclaimed and recycled material, and that's allowed for service and maintenance. The tricky bit is the supply chain will need more material coming back to continue to offer reclaim. We're really keen to help customers with volumes to return with buybacks as well as resupply deals. And many of you will know we've been actively involved in retail, supporting in one in particular, the Tesco project, which has been running for 3 years now. But it's really, really important to keep the reclaim supply going. We need more material coming back, and that has certainly slowed down more recently. So this is the scary bit. We've lost 3 months really with the current virus situation, and at the end of this year there will be another step down in the amount of material by carbon equivalent that can be supplied onto the market. Now, our industry should be praised for what it's achieved in meeting the challenges set by the F-gas regulations so far. A huge amount has been achieved. However, the next step down, which is only a few months away, is definitely going to be a challenge for everybody. If we do nothing differently soon, the 2021 quota will be insufficient to support the market in the future, as you can see from this reduction. It feels as if the move to lower GW refrigerants has slowed down, and we've definitely lost time with recent events. So December 31st is fast approaching, so it's really important that we are helping our customers identify the areas where they can make change. So what are the options? This is probably the easier part. New refrigerants are already available. We want to help customers make the change to lower GWP refrigerants and A2Ls now or as soon as possible. We produced a new F-gas guide to assist that with the maze of options that you'll find, and that's available to download free of charge from our website. And Peter and the technical team are very much here to help, guiding people through the decisions, and it's a complicated process. There are too many choices really. The air conditioning switch was very simple. Refrigeration is going to be way more complicated. But the reality is, if enough systems are changed to A2Ls, the next step down really won't be a problem. Now you can see from the figures on this slide and the GWP of the new alternative refrigerants, moving from 404A, which was around 4,000, to under 150 is an absolute game changer. Makes the 18% reduction look like a walk in the park. Sustainable low GWP refrigerants are readily available and in stock now, and already in use. And for new installations, for refrigeration, we would suggest considering 454C, 455A, and there's a 134A alternative, 1234YF, with a GWP of only 4. All of these products match cooling performance on existing refrigerants, exceed energy performance, and give the lowest life cycle cost of all technologies. Please do let us know how we can help with the future choices of refrigerant and equipment. It is a complicated subject. And as you can see, my example there, the co-op are already working with A2Ls, so things are moving quite quickly in some areas. Now, this is the subject which I'm hopeful will provoke the most discussion, and it's the area we really want to provide help and support with, and I'm sure is on the top of people's minds. Flammability and all the considerations around it. So Peter Woods will talk about EN378, location and occupancy classes, and selecting equipment on A2Ls, and answer your questions later. This is clearly a complicated subject, and I'm sure there'll be lots of debate about this, but we are here to help. So location classes and occupancy classes, please get your questions ready for Peter later. So our climate team is really here to help you. We've done lots of things recently, and we really want to assist the industry with the change that's going to happen. We've got new F-gas reporting app to enable people to manage their F-gas reporting requirements online and also track whereabouts of cylinders. We've got a nationwide technical support team that are here to help you, and our new guide that I mentioned earlier. So I thank you for your time and attention so far, and I really look forward to hearing the questions during the course of this event. And I now hand back to the panelists to take us through their areas of expertise. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Now, if you want to just click off your share screen, and then we will start seeing the pictures of the panelists. Now, what we tend to do in our question times is we introduce the panelists and we allow them to give a few minutes of introduction and talk about what's on their minds at the moment. So we're going to do that. We're still hoping to get John Ormerod from out of the technological wasteland onto the screen. So that will hopefully happen soon. But I will pass over, first of all, I think, to Graham Fox, who will probably give us a little bit of insight into that whole compliance, what are we doing about lockdown kind of scenario. So over to you, Graham.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Robert, for hosting this and for that introduction. Very good. Indeed, the compliance issue is something that I've, as you all know, I've been very strongly advocating and trying to press home to people for a long time. The phase down, because of the lockdown that you mentioned briefly, that we've lost 3 months, Robert, in your introduction there, which is quite right. But it's going to be very interesting, I think, later this year to see what knock-on effect that has on refrigerant prices, because we all know a year and a half ago, at the last big phase down step, which was a big step as well at that time, the prices rose astronomically for the end user, for the contractors. So I think because, and I mentioned this at the last one of these question time events, I think the fact that there has been such a downturn in industry over the last 2 months, 2.5 months, it means that quota hasn't been as in demand as it otherwise would have been. So although absolutely it's going to be a big step down, it's still going to take a lot of people by surprise, despite all of us repeatedly talking about it. It's going to be interesting, I think, to see how much of an effect it has. I don't think it's going to affect as much on prices as it did last time, because I do think as an industry we have been quite responsible in moving over to the transition refrigerants or the alternative refrigerants, probably at a quicker pace than a lot of other countries did, which is positive. So yeah, that's obviously going to be an interesting factor at the end of the year. As far as compliance is concerned, I'm pleased to say that despite everything that's been going on, the certification bodies, and I do speak to the other ones. I'm not just talking for, I'm obviously talking for REFCON, but I do speak to other bodies, and everything does seem to be actually taken over quite well at the moment, which is good. Very aware, obviously, that a lot of contractors are going to be struggling just now, because some of them, particularly those who specialise in one sector, have possibly had a very, very quiet couple of months. Some of them aren't even back working yet; they're still furloughed, which is of concern, I think, in the longer term. But for now, it's good. I don't really have anything I want to. I know you want me to throw some hand grenade in, Andrew, but I'd rather see what other people have got to say and ask the difficult questions, to be honest with you. Trying to be non-controversial. You're muted, Andrew.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I should say to the listeners is the mute button toggling on and off is the biggest threat to this seminar, because it's very hard to remember. Some people like me to be muted for a long time, but on this occasion, I'm paid to actually be on the microphone. Okay, Graham, thanks for that. Yeah, we will throw over to, you can prepare your hand grenade ammunition for later. What I'm going to do now is, because he's had the most hassle getting onto this, John Ormerod is now available on the phone, so we will hear him but not see him. Look at that! Look, it's a green. You are represented by a green circle. But I think it's a good time. Welcome, John. It's a good time to talk about the refrigerant landscape. So, how are you seeing it at the moment, and particularly, I guess, in lockdown?
Yes. Hi, Andrew. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You are loud and clear in broadcasting.
I'm loud and clear. Okay, great. Thank you. Just by way of to everybody who doesn't know me, I'm John Ormerod. I'm at AGAS's European business. And if you don't know who AGAS are, one of the UK's leading refrigerant repackers, and probably a lesson. In fact, we're Europe's largest reclaimer of refrigerants. Andrew, one of the things he's put on is to say, what's planned for the short to medium term, and there are quite a few things, I think, at the moment. Probably the foremost thing at the moment in everybody's mind is the COVID impact on our industry. It's clearly slowing down retrofit activity for obvious reasons. The economy's taking a bit of a hit. Everybody's being pretty cautious. And of course, let's not the hospitality sector, probably the one sector that's affected the most by all this. Bars, restaurants, hotels, not to see them coming back anytime quickly with social distancing rules as they stand. Look further forward, and we're talking now more than 6 months. We've got the 2021 step down in the F-gas quota system. A little about this earlier, pointed to 18% reduction. I'll apply that and put that in a little more context. It's 18% on the 2015 baseline number. But if you look forward to today and say, well, what's the year-on-year difference between 2019 or 2020 and 2021? It's more like a 29% reduction in the availability of refrigerant. Assume no significant changes in the refrigerants used. But that sounds like a complicated explanation, but you need to remember that the system is based on the carbon dioxide equivalent rather than absolute of refrigerants. And the reason it was done is how this shift over time to lower GWP refrigerants and not constrain the market. So if the industry moves quickly to low GWP refrigerants, then the market can still grow in absolute tonnage terms. So a 20% reduction. Another way to look at it is to say, well, what average GWP refrigerants sold in the UK need to be in 2021? And that number is around 900. So I put that in context of what we as AGAS see currently. What's our average? What's the average GWP of the basket of refrigerants we're selling at the moment? It's probably around 1,600. So there's quite a bit of movement that needs to happen in terms of going down that GWP curve if the market is not to go tight again. And we've seen what happens if the market goes tight. Prices extremely volatile as we saw in late 2017 and 2018. We also sit on it. I know we've been talking about it for 4 years, and not has really happened. But I think it looks like we're getting to the stage where Brexit is going to come around at the end of the year. And for us in the UK, from a refrigerant perspective, it means the splitting of the quota system in two. So the EU 27 will have its own quota system, and the UK will have its own quota system. And as we understand it today, the UK will continue to follow the same stages as F-gas regulation. Ordinarily, you might think that just splitting the quota system should be straightforward. It's far complicated. A lot of the refrigerant supply chains originate from in Europe already, so there's actually no way to, there are no import statistics for the UK to say how much refrigerant we've actually brought into the UK over the last 5 years, because the refrigerant's already in the single market, so there is no track between countries. So that's given DEFRA rather of trying to understand just how big the quota system needs to be for the UK. And let's hope they get it right, or else we could have some unexpected disruption from that source. Looking slightly further ahead, 2022, we've got some additional bans. This is mainly against larger commercial refrigeration systems, 40 kilowatts. The requirement for the refrigerator, it'll need to have a GWP of less than 150 by then, but that is quite specific to the size of equipment and the application. So whilst it'll trouble the real sector, generally the rest of the refrigeration sector will probably be able to work around it. I think this gets to the heart then of what is a key point for this webinar, which is around how we manage this transition to low GWP refrigerants. Because what it does bring is growing flammability of the refrigerants. There's simply no way to get away from it. The lower you go down the GWP curve, you get into this area where refrigerants start to become mildly flammable, and these are these A2L refrigerants. And as an industry, we really need to embrace this. It actually is manageable. It requires us to look at how we tackle installations. But Pete Woods he's more of an expert on that and what it actually is, the installer. And I won't steal his thunder. I'll let him talk about that. But perhaps just to finish off from my side, we're already seeing the broad trend of where particular applications are going. For instance, air conditioning, we've already seen a strong towards R32, which is a flammable refrigerant. And for most applications, it's a relatively forward change. Obviously, if you with slightly bigger air conditioning system, the flammability becomes a little tricky in terms of its application. And 410 is still remaining extremely popular, but the industry is certainly looking at some of these newer generation low GWP, really low GWP, things like 454B or 41, and things like that. In 134A, it fell out of fashion. It is now remains firmly in fashion these days because it is, in the scheme of things, a medium GWP refrigerant, so still have some life there on it. Commercial refrigeration, I think, is the key one where there are probably the most options available going down the GWP. But again, this is where we need to all get used to the mildly flammable refrigerants that are coming. Andrew, I think let me leave it there because I think that might tee Peter Woods up neatly to have a more in-depth discussion about how we handle A2Ls.
That's brilliant, John, and thanks very much because you're on the phone line. You are talking into a vacuum. I imagine you can have the same feeling as a DJ, not knowing whether anybody is listening. But we've been listening to a lot of that. You brought Brexit into the scenario, which is always a good one. cause A2L's flammability. So we'll pass over to Peter Woods in 2 seconds. A bit of housekeeping just to say, because I know a couple of you have found this already. When you're putting your questions in, don't hit return. Don't make it into nice paragraphs, because you find yourself doing 3 different questions in 3 different parts. So put it all in 1 paragraph, but try not to keep it too long. So we can try and deal with the question in 1 sentence. But we'll come to specific questions in a minute. There's a lot going on out there in the audience, and we'll come back to that. So we'll throw straight over to Peter, who's going to talk a little bit about flammability, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Just a quick introduction. I'm Peter Woods. I'm the technical sales manager for Wolseley. I run the regional technical engineers, and I support our sales team and our production facility here at Newbury. I'm here today really to sort of instill some confidence in people that A2Ls are not a scary explosive. They can be managed. They're not to be avoided. We've got to adopt these refrigerants. We've got to take them on, and we've got to understand them, the safe application of them, and there's plenty of information out there that we can use. I think people immediately put up barriers when they hear flammability. Flammability is only in these refrigerants is mild. It has to have a large ignition source to ignite this refrigerant. You have to have certain concentrations in this refrigerants. You need to have a whole set of circumstances that arise to initiate a pop. It's highly unlikely that you will get an explosion that will blow your doors off. So I just wanted to be here to reassure people that there is guidance out there. We have a lot of myths surrounding these refrigerants at the moment, but we've got some basic regulatory standards. Some of them can be quite complex, but FITA have done a really good job of putting some information out there. I'll encourage everybody to have a look at the guidance of risk assessment for dangerous substances and explosives, and also to look at their A2L guide. A lot of that information in there is key to installing refrigerants of A2L class safely. It's not rocket science. It's just adopting clear, precise procedures and risk assessments to ensure that your system is safe. EN 378 gives very clear guidance on refrigerant charge sizes. We have a table C2. Robert showed a couple of slides earlier on that. So the basic thing that you need to be doing is to be looking at your occupancy class and your location class. If you get your occupancy class and your location class correct, then you are given guidance under C2 in EN 378 for the maximum charge size. And these charge sizes, they are not small charge sizes. You aren't limited to the same as you are with an A3. You can go well beyond 60 kilos, and in some cases you can actually be unlimited on these refrigerants. It's quite clear within C2 what you can do. So I just want to take questions from people who've got concerns about the application of refrigerant, and just give them some clear guidance, hopefully, and point them in the right direction as to where to find the information. I mean, my team, they're all up to speed with this, and if anybody needs any help, then my team are available. We have 4 regional technical engineers and myself. If they don't have the correct answer, then they can defer to myself, and I will come back to people directly with answers. I want to throw a few questions out there as well. You guys are probably asking, do I need to apply ATEX? Yes and no is the answer. It depends on the application. It depends on the location of the equipment, and it depends on the gas you're using. So you have to carry out a risk assessment. Provided you carry out the risk assessment under DESIR and EN 378, you are going to get it right. You are going to have a safe application. You may need to put some ATEX fans in on plant rooms to vent the plant area in the event of a catastrophic leak. But in general terms, you will not need leak detection on small systems. It's only going to be on the larger systems. So my major concern is for larger application systems. I think we're going to get a lot of information from the manufacturers as the product becomes available with regards to small system charge sizes. It's where we hit the larger charge sizes that I think the industry needs a bit more information and a bit more confidence in using these A2Ls. The other thing is retrofitting. I think we need to understand we can't retrofit this stuff. We need to be putting new equipment in. We need to carry out the risk assessment and put the new equipment in to a high standard. Bodging things, I've heard of it on AC, putting 32 into existing AC kit. That ain't going to happen. You cannot do this with these compressors, especially the industrial semi-hermetic compressors. You are going to end up blowing these things up mechanically, not explosive. I must add, you will ruin these compressors very, very quickly. So you need to understand that the limitation is new equipment. It's not going to be retrofittable. And also, when you come across systems which have got existing equipment on, so you may go into a large cold store, you might have 2 sets of equipment in there. You're going to be replacing one piece of that equipment. So somebody else has installed a system. It may be an A2L system. You might have a new A2L system that's got to go in. Do you have to do a risk assessment on somebody else's piece of kit? Well, not necessarily. You are providing your customer with a safe installation of your equipment. If somebody else has done an installation, then they need to have done their own risk assessment on that. We are concerned about the charge size within your equipment that you are supplying to the end user. By all accounts, do take heed of what is in the room, and if you feel that the risk is there, that you need to put additional measures in, then you need to consider it and put those measures in place, backed up by your risk assessment. I think that should throw a few sort of ideas out there of what sort of questions I'd like to be answering, and I'll transfer over to Andrew.
Thank you, Peter. That's throwing your own questions in. That's always a good recipe for keeping the debate going. So thanks for that. We talked about manufacturers, and that's an ideal opportunity to invite in our final panelist. So John Broughton is here. So John, what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, just to introduce myself very quickly, I work for Danfoss. I'm a global application manager with my main focus is on commercial refrigeration. Now, as we know today, the refrigerant choice, probably the most talked about subject for the past few years, let's say that. And as we go along this journey, and to me, it is a journey, and there's many important topics that we need to think about, and focusing on what I do within Danfoss, which is the application of our products. We, as an industry, we need to think about the applications that we're working in, the range of refrigerants that we're working with. Are they suitable for that application? Not just from a GWP perspective, but also think about the component suitability as well, because that often gets missed. I spend a lot of time on site. And what needs to be done to ensure a safe and reliable, we've heard from Peter, reliable, safe, long-lasting refrigeration system. It's fine putting a system in, pressing the button and then walking away. We need to make sure that what we do is correct, both technically, and from the rules and the regulations point of view. This move towards the lower GWP refrigerants, such as A2L, it does bring challenges, but I think with clear understanding, clear guidance, and the regulation behind it, it will become easier. Nothing is impossible. Concerns from my side, from Danfoss, I hear a lot of questions about refrigerants, some right, some wrong. General sort of questions, and some of them might be quite sort of simple. You know, can I use a normal spanner on an A2L system? Something I get asked quite frequently. What about the recovery unit? What about the vacuum pump? Do I need a special one? Can I use my existing one? As Peter said, and this is a question that I get asked, can I drop in an A2L? Definitely not. But you know, these are questions that sort of come to me. Then we talk about the dedicated products, so expansion valves, compressors, all that sort of thing. Can I use this expansion valve with this refrigerant? Those types of questions. Where can I check if a product is actually suitable for this refrigerant? And then, as Peter said again, regarding the limit on charge size, that seems to be one of the biggest questions, and I think the most misunderstood, and the one that sort of causes the most concern. So those are fairly simple, straightforward questions, I think, that are going around the industry today, and hopefully in this format we can hopefully answer some. So that's it from me for now. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Now, what we often have in this scenario, we've thrown up quite a lot of things to talk about, and there are quite a lot of questions out there. So the challenge for you panelists is now to try and tackle some of them. I'm trying to group them into themes for you a little bit. Clearly, one of the discussion topics is about transition. So John Ormod's told us that at the moment the average GWP level it needs to come down, and pretty quickly. Then on the other hand, we've heard that lockdown and all those kind of scenarios have not helped transition measures. So there are a couple of questions. I'll read one of them out to you, and then I guess it's, you know, the way Zoom works is that if you say you're going to answer it, the camera will go to you. So you may want to say, I'll take this question. And if nobody answers, I'll have to pick you. Somebody has asked, we're heading to unknown waters in terms of COVID, but does the panel think that environmental issues in general are going to be shelved as survival instinct takes over amongst the end users, with planned upgrades of refrigerant replaced by emergency drop-ins, that's in quotes, at the point of a major gas loss? Because this, the questioner says, this could lead to major chaos. So do you think that's a fear, that people will just rush to the quickest, cheapest scenario?
No.
Right, what have I told you about one-word answers on this panel?
I think
Okay,
the thing is that it's easy to think, yeah, that people will water down the regulations or turn a blind eye to the regulations. I think what we have seen already with this crisis is that DEFRA wouldn't entertain even being seen to be watering down the actual regulatory landscape during this crisis, where other government departments have been flexible and allowed extensions to time limits. For example, the car MOT situation, where if your car was running out of its MOT, they allowed the 6 month up to 6 month extension during this crisis. Whereas we tried to get that with DEFRA for the sake of expiring qualifications, expiring CITB J11 qualifications, and expiring REFCOM or QUIDOS or whatever company certifications, and all they've done is give us a succession of emails saying we're still looking into this, Graham, which they've basically just been kicking the ball down the road until we come out of this and it's not an issue anymore, which is why we're trying to work behind the scenes with the other certification bodies to kind of fix this long term, so we're not in this situation again. So I think that was quite a clear demonstration that actually environmental legislation is not something that they will tinker with. And I think politically, no government can be seen to be watering down environmental legislation either, because the press will have an absolute field day. We've all seen the furore in the press because of government advisors breaking the rules and bending the rules to suit themselves, whatever. But you know, with environmental legislation, there's just been absolutely no leeway given. So
I also think Sorry, Graham.
No,
Can I interrupt?
Carry on.
no, I'm finished.
Yeah, I also think that it's an easy option for somebody to kick the can down the road. We as an industry should be trying to encourage our end users to look at the legislation and see the future. It's not going to go away. They might get away with it in the short term, but they're not going to get away with it in the long term. So we need to be encouraging them to move to these refrigerants and expressing the benefits of these refrigerants so that we can tell them that they're going to save money in the long run by going now. If they've got a energy cost saving that you can put in front of them and it's a pound note figure and you put that against the alternative of the quick fix, then I'm sure anybody who's got any sense will take up the long-term solution. It's going to be very, very silly for them to do this on a short-term basis because they're going to be left with a bill which is going to be far higher in the long term.
Sort of agree, Peter, but you know, we have a solution today in our business regarding refrigerants. I can see personally that they might delay the investment in things like changing the refrigerant if they're still within the legal bounds of the GWP. That might just be delayed a little bit until the system gets back to, let's say, normal, whatever normal becomes.
Yeah, but refrigerant costs are going to be increasing, so maintaining systems which are leaking is a no-no. And also, if you've got a system which you've got a lifespan which is limited, your energy costs are going to be huge. So why not change that system to a more efficient system and a safe system and bite the bullet on it? And it's going to be difficult, I know, because companies will not want to spend money, but we need to be encouraging people to see the future rather than taking the quick fix. It's not a sensible way to go forward.
I think that is a sectoral thing as well, though, because I mean, certainly for commercial refrigeration, absolutely. I think they haven't actually suffered that much as we've seen the queues outside the supermarkets. Their actual turnover hasn't really been affected by all this downturn, whereas other sectors have been massively affected. As John said earlier, the hospitality industry in particular has been absolutely decimated by this. So if you're looking at, for example, a 404A system in a cellar cooling environment, they're going to have a very different take on this from the point of view of biting the bullet, as you said, Peter, than a supermarket is going to have, because they haven't had any money coming in for 3 months now, and in all likelihood they're not going to have any real income for at least another month anyway. So the concept of them having to make some kind of investment, because as you said earlier, a lot of these applications are not drop-in or retrofit options, so they're just not going to have that capex at the moment.
Yeah, but we are talking about systems that could be still containing R22, 422G, etc.
Yeah,
so
I know. Yeah.
It's those sorts of systems I'm talking about. You can't keep them running. What are you going to put in them? There isn't the available.
I'm with you now. Yeah.
So in a minute, I'm going to come on to a little bit more of a discussion about availability and what that means. But I've been asked just to point out one thing on the subject of flammability, just to be clear. I've got a please here from Martin and Peter, which is, can we stop using the word mildly flammable and use the word lower flammability?
That's political correctness in my book.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you joined us on this panel, Peter, because we've had more explosive metaphors from you than I've heard for a long time, which is good when we're trying to play down.
I like to look at things practically.
Yes, indeed.
I don't like to pussyfoot around.
No, that's what we want.
I'll tell you.
That's what we want.
And political correctness is not one of my fortes.
Okay, so Peter will keep using mild, and we'll say lower, and now we'll all be fine. But the other key thing to stress is that that Peter want to say that, can we be clear that all installations need to see a compliant risk assessment, no matter what refrigerant they use.
Well, John's joined us
on screen. Hello, John.
Fantastic.
He's back in the room, literally. So that's just about you should have a DESIR risk assessment. So that's a little bit back to.
Can I just come back on that actually? Well, you mentioned
Yeah.
about the DESIR risk assessments. It's just it's something that Peter said. I'd just like to clarify because you said, Peter, I think that if you're only replacing a part of that system and that system is already A2L compliant, then do you have to do the risk assessment for the whole system?
You still have to do the risk assessment, yes.
Yeah, but I think what you said, or certainly what it came across to me, was that you were saying you only have to do the risk assessment on what you were doing.
No. What I was trying to say was, if somebody else has installed a system which you're not touching in that environment, you've got two systems and you're working on the other system. Do you have to take that system, the second system, into account in your risk assessment?
Right, I'm with you. So I thought you were talking about for example, replacing a condensing unit on
what
the
I'm
system.
saying is
because you're fundamentally changing that installation of that system, and you therefore have to do the risk assessment.
What I was trying to make the point is you as a contractor are not responsible for somebody else's installation unless you're taking over the service contract. If somebody's put something in there and that is working happily, you have to assume that that's already had its risk assessment and it's a safe installation. Obviously, if you see something wrong, then you need to flag it. But your system is the one you're concentrating on. That's the system you need to do your risk assessment on and ensure that it's safe.
Yeah,
fine.
Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's just have a quick conversation. There's several questions that come in around. I'll summarise. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk about the new refrigerants, but are they available today? If I want to upgrade, can I get them? Can I get them from Wolseley? Can I get them from AGAS? So the very low GWP HFOs, for instance, the lower GWP HFOs. So, John, now you're on screen. Perhaps you'd like to have a little talk around that.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Yes, I don't know what I did. I seem to have finally got to grips with the technology. Yes, pretty much all of these low GWP refrigerants are now available. Whether you'll find them in every single branch of Wolseley, I'll let Robert answer that. But given that they are fairly new, they might not be available every possible outlet that there is, but they are available. Supply chains are operational.
Sorry, John, your internet, I think, is playing up a bit. So we may have to ask you to go off of the video and just repeat your answer in audio only.
Right.
Can you click your stop video? Okay.
Yes.
So brilliant.
Yes, all these new low GWP refrigerants are in fact available and will be available through Wolseley.
Excellent. Do you want to come in on that, Robert? Do you want to?
Yes. Thank you, Andrew. Yes, and what we've done over the years as we've seen new refrigerants come in is we've managed the new refrigerants in along with the demand. So when we saw 448 requirements, we started to populate our branch network with stock of the new refrigerants. So we'll always make sure our network stocks the refrigerants where demand is starting to happen. It's something we have to navigate, but we have some very good systems to help us manage that. And we've certainly got all the refrigerants that we're seeing demand for now in the network. R32 is a good example. That moved quite quickly. We saw the need to stock R32 nationwide to support contractors in the early days, and we went ahead and did that, and we'll be doing the same with some of the new A2Ls as soon as we see it as necessary.
So in answer to the specific question, is it practical to be making that switch right now? Who wants to answer that?
I think I'll take that one.
Okay.
Yes, it is practical to do it now. We've already carried out a couple of installations. The major retailers are already trialling low flammable refrigerants. The results have been pretty good. I mean, the energy efficiency is there. We're seeing increases in energy efficiency and cost savings. The compressor manufacturers are all coming to the board. They're bringing new product in. Unfortunately, IKK's been, Chillventa, I should say. I'm going back a bit.
Chillventa been IKK for a long time, Peter.
Yeah. Sorry, Chilventa is cancelled this year, which is unfortunate because that was going to be the showcase for A2L equipment, and it would have been really interesting to get down there and to see some of the new innovations that are coming to market. Having said that, the manufacturers are still going to release all of this equipment. The likes of Danfoss, Tecumseh, Emerson, they've all got product available to us.
You have to name them all now.
Yeah, we've all seen product available. So we'll have condensing units, we'll have compressors, we'll be able to make multi-compressor packs, semiometic systems, you name it. The equipment is coming. It's a short way away. Not everything's available at the moment. Obviously, the likes of Danfoss are going to be putting their equipment in, I think, towards the end of October. I may be corrected on that. But most of the manufacturers, by the end of the year, we should see a reasonable offering on the smaller split systems and on compressors from Emerson. And also Bitzer, I should mention as well. They've got compressors available. So we've got the equipment to select, and we can build quite complex machines with this equipment.
So taking that on a little bit, another question along those lines. Again, probably to the wholesalers or to John. For smaller cold rooms and walk-in freezers, what refrigerants are you being asked for at the moment? Is it naturals? Is it A2Ls? That 1.5 to 5 kilowatt kind of capacity.
Peter, from my point of view, it's 448, 449, 452 for low temperature, 513 and 134A. That's what I'm seeing when I spend time on site. I'm not seeing that move yet to the lower GWP. I think we are creatures of habit, and the contractors that I deal with, they use what they know until they are, let's say, pushed from a legislative point of view to move to something else. There's always the early adopters who want to try something new, but I think generally people are using what they know. So that's the list of refrigerants that I've given. Peter, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Those are the most common refrigerants that we're seeing at the moment, and that has been governed by the availability of the compressors. But that is changing. We will see a marked change in that availability towards the end of this year. So hopefully by the spring we should be seeing packaged condensing units and compressors in commercial quantities available to the market.
Okay, and one more specific question on the A2L front, and that is, are there any manufacturers offering currently a compliant A2L split cold room solution, which could be part of the same question that we asked, I suppose. An A2L split cold room solution?
Yes.
There you go.
There are some sample systems available to the market at the moment. If I can mention it, Tecumseh are coming with their equipment fairly quickly. We can see some of that, and Danfoss has got some equipment that's available to us as well. So I wouldn't say that at this point it's commercially available, but certainly we can get hold of sample systems and small quantity systems to trial for people.
So I guess the message is to keep those lines of communication going on the newer refrigerants. Talk to your suppliers. I'm doing the promotion for you, basically, guys. Talk to your suppliers, and then at least you are having that dialogue, and you can talk about what's available, what's becoming available. Bigger systems, similar question. Industrial systems. What do you see with coming on the horizon for where you'd normally, that's what it says, industrial system, which would normally use perhaps CO2? Is there an A2L?
Well, we've got to look at these. Not all one size fits all. It never has been refrigeration. So we've got systems, CO2 systems. They are expensive. We all know that. They're about 3 times more expensive than the standard system. A2Ls will be slightly more expensive, but nowhere near as expensive as CO2. it won't be able to go up to the really big duties. Once we start to get above 100 kilowatts, then we've got to look at how we split systems up into smaller systems. We've got to look at maximum charge sizes. We've got a lot of restrictions within the regulations that we have to adhere to. And really, from my own experience, when you start getting above 200-300 kilowatts, you want to be looking at CO2 seriously, and you want to be looking at ammonia seriously. And there's a bit of a grey area which starts at about 150 kilowatts. So you need to assess the customer's need, the running costs, the efficiencies, the capital cost. You need to put all of that into the basket and weigh up what is the best option for you and your customer.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep flicking across to the questions coming in thick and fast. I can barely keep up. There's a 6-part question here. Disobeying all my rules on keeping the questions short, I think. So quick question. What about R410A? Can this be retrofitted with anything else apart from, can it be retrofitted? And should the replacement be R32 or something else? That's a nice open question, isn't it? Who wants to take that one? What do you do with an R410A system?
I avoid it. I'm a fridge man, sorry.
Okay. Graham, do you want to come in on that with your?
Yeah, I mean, I think Peter already kind of covered that earlier by saying that, you know, Robert covered it earlier when he said that with air conditioning it's quite simple. There's one alternative. With refrigeration, it's a very different kettle of fish. But that one alternative in the air conditioning market, which is largely where the 410A is, doesn't have these alternatives. So no, you can't retrofit a 410A air conditioning unit with R32, for example. And I think
it has happened.
It has happened. Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, and as what they say, I think most of us
they don't last very long.
In the industry know that it comes with massive problems and washes the compressor oil out, and the compressor basically burns out very rapidly. So it's just not an option. Apart from the fact that condensing unit isn't actually rated for A2L use anyway. So what you can do, of course, is you can often use the same indoor unit if it's a split system. So you can actually get away with doing the retrofit, a part retrofit, by just replacing the outdoor unit. Because often with the manufacturers of these air conditioning units now that are doing dual production lines with 410A and R32, in many cases that indoor unit is exactly the same whether it's 410A or R32. So it just depends which outdoor unit you match up with. It will determine whether, you know, what it's running. So as long as you do the risk assessment, and you know, then there shouldn't be any issue with doing that. So at least it cuts down the cost in terms of it's not a complete strip out of equipment. That might save some of the costs, I guess, if you're a contractor and you have an end user client who has money worries and they don't want to strip out the entire system, then they possibly don't have to.
Is there? This is just a general question. As we're in, this is, I guess, again for you, Graham. As we're in the lockdown, are we in a situation where there's a lot of contractors who are available, who haven't got work on, who you could consider for a project, or is it the case that everybody's really up against it because of the social distancing and things like that? What's the sort of landscape for contractors?
I'm getting a huge variety of answers from my members, the contractor members, when I'm talking to them at the moment. And I said in the last one of these question time events that it very much depends what sector they work in. So if they have a broad portfolio of work that they do, from, you know, commercial fridge and supermarkets to commercial office blocks and air conditioning, then they've by and large been okay, been able to weather the storm. Whereas those contractors who purely do air conditioning, and particularly for the smaller contractors who are just doing air conditioning for small independent offices, then they have really struggled, and they've been furloughed pretty much for the last 2 months. So I know some of them are starting to come back now, and speaking to some of them over the last kind of week or 10 days has highlighted that some of them are coming back and they're very worried because the work isn't picking up yet, and I think there is that uncertainty because there's been such a hit to the economy as a whole. There has been, the prospect of larger investment in capex on buildings and offices has been has worried a lot of people. And I think also if we look longer term at the implications of social distancing, if it's a longer term measure, and certainly a lot of people, including us, are looking at reducing the number of people who are in offices. So, for example, I was in a webinar 2 days ago, or a conference call 2 days ago with local authorities, and this local authority was saying, they were talking about a particular incident and asking me for advice on what they can do. And they said they have an office that has 5 cassettes in it. There's 20 people in it normally. When they come back, there are only going to be 7 people in it. So, if you only have 7 people in that large open plan office, the actual requirement for air conditioning is likely to be a lot less than it was before, because you're going to have obviously fewer bodies with the heat gains off those people. They're going to have less equipment in there. So the actual market is going to shrink because the actual occupancy of offices will naturally drop. So that has an implication on the workload that contractors who are in that sector specifically will have in the future as well.
I think we ought to mention the catering sector as well, and obviously the number of restaurants that have had to close down, all the pub trade, all of these businesses are basically on hold at the moment, and all of the contractors servicing those are basically dried up on their workload at the moment.
Yeah.
And until the government releases these businesses from lockdown, we're not going to see an uptake on that side of the business. And I've spoken to a couple of people, and I've spoken to a local butcher who ran a very successful business supplying meat into the restaurant trade in London. Overnight, his business shut down. He had to furlough 50 staff. He's had to put 2 major projects on hold because he's fighting his cash flow at the moment. He just needs to make sure that he keeps his business afloat, ready for the upturn.
I guess this underlines, we've said that this, at the moment, these are difficult times. Economically, they're difficult times. And you would think then that it would be difficult for end users to consider investment in new products, new installations, upgrade installations. But we need to remind people that the legislation hasn't gone away. But
there's also, Peter mentioned about the catering industry, he's quite right. But I think because there's so many of those businesses will unfortunately go to the wall over the next few weeks and months, that has massive implications as well for equipment sellers, because there will be an awful lot of second-hand equipment that may only be a year or 2 old and is perfectly serviceable, coming onto the market. So that flooding of the market of perfectly good used equipment is going to have an impact, obviously, on the sale of new equipment and the investment in new equipment as well. And that's a big factor that needs to be considered as well, I think.
But to throw a positive spin on it, behind the question was, perhaps there are opportunities to have these discussions with people who are perhaps not quite so busy as they were, as to plan things going forward about transitions and that kind of thing. Let's crack on with some more questions, because there are a lot of them. Energy efficiency. So we talk about GWP a lot, and one of the problems that comes up is we sometimes forget about the energy efficiency. And so there's a couple of questions along these. How much are people factoring in energy efficiency when we're talking about transitions and new installations? Is it a race to low GWP at the expense of energy efficiency? Who wants to take that one?
Well, I'd like to take a little bit of that on. I think Graham can answer some as well, but I do think that the race to low GWP has actually happened with regards to the supermarket sector. The retail sector have all pretty much switched over to CO2 where they can. And the energy efficiencies aren't great on CO2. You've got to have a energy reclaim system. You've got to heat up hot water to really get the COPs up on these. I'm not saying that that they're not efficient if they're in larger systems, but certainly in smaller systems, they're not that efficient. So we really think that the low flammable refrigerants, they are comparable, if not better, than the standard refrigerants, so your 448s, your 404s. So why would you want to spend additional capital cost on the equipment and running cost? If you put that together, you can get a life cycle cost, and it is all about the life cycle cost. If you can prove that the life cycle cost is less with an A2L system, then it's going to be to the benefit of your customer
and the environment.
And the environment, yeah.
Ultimately, and I think that's a really good point, Peter. You know, we discussed this in the original F-gas regulation when they were looking at targeting high GWP refrigerants before it became what we have now with the phase down steps in the original regulation. And one of the things we were at ARIA, the European Contractors Association, were advocating very loudly was the TUI concept, the total equivalent warming impact, because that is absolutely crucial. If you're really concerned about the environment, then it's not just about the short-term hits. You have to take in the whole life cycle cost implications. And you're absolutely, and I've said that a lot at stakeholder meetings in Brussels about I do feel that, I think you're right. I think the race to low GWP has been done, and I think it was won by the GWP lobbyists from the perspective that we now have moved on quite considerably. But I think what we do now have to do is we do now have to really drive home that message that actually lowest GWP is not necessarily best 15 to 20 year life cycle of a piece of equipment, because everything has to be implicated into that. And
we didn't have what we're doing, or did we, Graham?
No, that's right. Absolutely. And I think it was very difficult to make our case before. I think we made our case quite well, and I know people at EPE made their case with the EU as well at the time. The trouble was we weren't talking to engineers. We were talking to politicians and civil servants who actually didn't understand what the question was that they were asking. And I think that's one of the problems, and it's often the problem when you're dealing with politicians, unfortunately, or with civil servants. That quite often they know their sector very well, but they don't know the technicalities of it. And trying to have a technical discussion with someone who isn't technical is a very difficult thing to do successfully, as I think we all know. But what we're doing at ARIA, with the app that we brought out a couple of years ago for the EN 378 compliance, we're actually in the process of developing a TUI calculator on that as well. Our Swedish colleagues produced a really good online calculator for the TUI, and we're getting that converted to add on to the app as well, which I think as that argument starts to develop, and that the need for proving that whole life cost starts to develop and become more prevalent, I think that add on to the app is going to be quite useful for contractors. Yeah.
I'm going to rattle through a few specific questions, so some short answers, hopefully. Robert, can you remind us when the Wolseley app will be available, please?
By the end of this month. It's in trial phase at the moment. I'm being vague because we just want to make sure everything works properly, but by the end of this month.
The good thing about the refrigeration industry is, unlike the government, track and trace has worked very well, hasn't it? So these apps are very useful. Just thought I'd get the gag in there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about hazardous environments again, because there's a specific question here about A2L refrigerant detectors. Should detectors for A2Ls be ATEX certified per se, or is its protection only required, that level of protection only required when the installation area has been classified as hazardous?
It's all part of your DSEER risk assessment, isn't it? And ATEX directive and DSEER regulations are essentially the same thing. DSEER is essentially the UK's implementation of the ATEX directive.
Okay.
So as long as you're doing your risk assessment for DSEER that has already been talked about, and there was mentioned that the FITA guidance is really quite explicit and very good on it, then that's it.
We should refer you to back to the FITA guidance on risk assessments, which, as you say, is very good. Apparently, it's not clear in the EN 378 text as to whether it's specifically for the detector or for the application. So the answer look at the feeder guidance. It's a good one. But there's another question on leak detection, which is EN378. How will compliance with sampling intervals for leak detection units impact on A2L refrigerants?
In EN378?
I've not seen that.
No,
Okay.
there isn't a requirement on sampling intervals. It refers to manufacturers'
That's
guidance.
explosive atmospheres, isn't it?
Yeah.
And EN378 is not covering the explosive atmospheres to that depth.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm.
That's good.
And we're not generating an explosive atmosphere in the sense of using an A3. We're using an A2, an A2L. So you've got to have very high intensity sparks to ignite the refrigerant. You've got to have the correct level of concentration refrigerant in the room, and you've got to have a constant ignition source as well. So I can't see how leak detectors will be a source of or an issue with regards to A2Ls.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there a timeline for an update to the Pressure Equipment Directive to recognise A2Ls? Is that one for you, Graham?
Timeline for an updated pressure. There's no timeline to an update of any European directive or regulation or standard. They work to very. I can't remember the exact date, but they won't make it. They never do.
But does that? I guess behind that question is, does it cause problems with meeting the PED with A2Ls? Often take a breath.
Yeah.
Okay.
PED is a funny one because it's some of our European colleagues at ARIA have massive problems with their national governments and the implementation of PED, and it's just not something that a lot of people really pay an awful lot of heed to in the UK. It's one of these, a little bit like EN378, where every specification says it must comply with EN378, and yet when I do seminars around the country, I frequently ask for a show of hands for who actually has access to it. And quite often there's not a single person in an audience of 40 or 50 people actually have access to it. And yet they'll all say in their specifications, yes, I'm working to EN378. Well, how can you say it if you don't actually have a copy of that? PED is a bit like that. It has a lot of very stringent requirements in it. Most people will actually be adhering to it without knowing they're adhering to it. But most people actually don't really refer to it on a day-to-day basis. Manufacturers are different. I'm talking about from a contractor's point of view. Most of them don't actually have real access to it. Manufacturers refer to it a lot more frequently because they have to be able to demonstrate they're complying with it within their various certifications.
Here's a question for Robert, right in your wheelhouse, I think. There's concern amongst some of the contractors that the move towards lower flammability and the element of flammability requires more information out in the market. What are people doing at this? Me put this into their words. What are people doing about the information side? You've got some information, haven't you, for helping people to deal with the lower flammability?
Yes, thank you, Andrew. It is a complicated subject, and I think we have created a new guide. And I think the most important thing is we are absolutely here to provide technical support, as Peter's alluded to. We have a large team of people working across the UK. We're happy to help customers and guide them through. But I have actually made a note. Perhaps we should produce a one-pager as well, sort of, which is something we're looking to doing straight away. But so we've got a brand new guide to help customers see this through, and we've got a team of people, a team of experts that are absolutely there to help. So it's a good question, and you
could put a one-page flyer in your copy of RAC, for instance.
That sounds like an excellent idea, Andrew.
Something like that. Excellent. I mean, I think behind the questioner's question was the feeling that we need to broadcast the information more, that flammability, which I think is true, flammability is here to stay in some form, and there's also a training aspect, isn't there, Graham?
Absolutely, very much so. I mean, that's probably the biggest factor in the F-gas review that we need to look at is the skills issue, and I think the entire industry right across the continent is in agreement with that we have major concerns, and I understand completely what Peter's saying about the likelihood of an A2L actually catching fire or going pop or whatever. But I think the trouble that we have obviously is that, yes, we have this lower flammability recognition within our sector, but of course the health and safety executive don't. They have non-flammable and flammable. And until there's some, and that's the same, it's not just the UK's health and safety executive, that's the same everywhere in the world that I know of. I don't know of any national authority health and safety executive equivalent that actually recognises the term mildly or lower flammable. And that does bring with it implications from a risk assessment point of view, that employers obviously have a duty of care to make sure their employees are actually competent to handle whatever task that you are giving them to do. And the definition of competence, of course, is actually to have been trained by somebody who is technically competent to demonstrate you can carry out that task unsupervised in a safe manner. So without training and being able to formally recognize that you have had that training path, then it's impossible really to demonstrate competence. And I think as we move towards more and more flammable refrigerants, which is absolutely necessary and it is going to happen, there's no way of avoiding it, I think as an industry we do need to recognize that we have to upskill. And I know there will be some contractors that will be screaming at their computer screens now saying, oh, you're just trying to make more money off me. And it's not about that. It's about being able to prove that you are actually competent and you can carry out this work in a safe manner. Because the trouble is, because there's no definition in legal terms between flammable and mildly flammable, from a legal point of view, an employment law, you have to actually make sure you are compliant with those alternatives, and you can't just say a manufacturer's course on installing an R32 split system is not sufficient. It has to be something that's recognised by industry and carried out officially. So that's probably going to be a very big factor in the FGAS review process, which starts later on this year at the EU, and certainly we're talking about that already with DEFRA.
So just asking a question straight to Graham then, if we don't have that in law, what is the situation in law of somebody installing a flammable system, forget mildly or whatever? Is that legally allowed if there's no legal training course for that yet?
Yeah, there are enough engineers that have done either the City and Guilds 6187, I think, which is the hydrocarbons course.
Yeah.
And of course we developed the ACRIB flammables training course as well last year. That's being rolled out now. So it is now in place that we can actually take these formal routes. Before those formal routes were in place, an awful lot of contractors weren't doing it. They could say that if they were doing the manufacturer's training courses and they were only installing that piece of kit, then technically they could say they have done a formal training course and they would have something to show for that. But it's different if they do for example, and I'm not picking on manufacturers here, but if somebody had done a Mitsubishi Electric in-house course, for example, and then went and applied that to go and try and retrofit a commercial fridge system with A2L, I would be questioning the competence. Yeah.
So I guess the long and short of that is, if you do a hydrocarbon course, then you are qualified, whatever that means, to install A2L. Yeah.
Even though I actually think the hydrocarbons course goes over the top for A2L, which is why we developed the ACRIB flammables training course. Because that's a generic flammables awareness course. Right. Whereas the hydrocarbons course has very strict limitations on the 3 meter length of the cords on recovery machines and all those kinds of stuff. So there are things that you have to do to comply with the hydrocarbons City and Guilds curriculum that aren't relevant to A2Ls.
And I think that is where this guidance comes from, because it's fine having a lengthy document that somebody has to read, But I think the trade, and we talk about, you know, our real customers out there. So forgetting the supermarket sector, we're talking about the guy who installs a, you know, small butcher's cold room somewhere. We need to get to him. And how do we do that? I think that's the biggest question that I've got. You know, from our point of view, we can put guidance out with our products, but from a legal point of view, that's something else. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we face in our business.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're always talking about, but I think we should double down on this, is simplifying the message, because as an industry, we're very good at making guidance, but we're also quite good at making quite extensive guidance, because everybody's engineers and they want to explain everything. But it's getting those simple messages across, and that's food for thought. But arguably, that's what these sort of events are doing. Now we're going to run till 11:35 because we started late, so that means we've got 6 minutes left to try and answer some of these questions. I would say that if anybody feels their specific questions haven't been answered, to email that question again at rac@emap.com, and then we will pass them to the gentleman here. A couple of very quick ones. So John B, can you tell us when A2L, your Danfoss A2L equipment, will be available?
We have a range of controlled products available for A2Ls now.
Yeah.
If you would like to check the suitability of a product, and I mentioned that before, you know, please only use a product that is qualified for that refrigerant with that refrigerant. There's two places to go for that. We've got the Cool Selector software, which has a feature in it, and also we've got I forgot the link now. Sorry, this is always the challenge.
You're going to have to email it into the email address at this rate.
Go to store.danfoss.com, and that will give you a list of the. If you search a product or a code number, that will then give you a list of the refrigerants that it is suitable for. So we've got controls products. We'll be coming with a range of condensed units later this year, and I think, like everybody, you know, that will start off with the smaller capacities, and then move on to the larger capacities.
So while you're on the call, one more question for you, to do with walk-in chillers. Are A2L refrigerants suitable? Has work been done on the PRVs to see whether they will provide an appropriate level of ventilation in the QLMB levels?
I think if they're talking about the pressure relief, whether they're talking about the pressure relief on the refrigeration system, I presume, or the pressure relief for the box, not sure.
That might be one to ask so questioner, if you could send that on the email at rac@emap.com. We can.
If it's PRVs, they are available.
Okay, it was PRVs. Good. John Ormerod, we need your view on what do you think is going to happen to prices and that kind of thing, and tightening and availability, please.
Oh, the $1 million question.
$1 million questions. Why are you here?
I would say at the moment, availability is not an issue for most mainline products. There's good availability of reclaimed products at the moment, but I'll put a caveat on that. Reclaimed 404, for instance, is not a bottomless pit, but there is certainly sufficient to keep the market going at the moment. To answer your primary question around price increases, this is very difficult to answer. Ordinarily, in the absence of COVID-19, I think you would have expected prices to rise probably towards the end of the year as the step down comes into focus for people and you start to get some people positioning, ramping up inventories ahead of the step down, which would drive some scarcity in the market. I think COVID's having an effect on demand this year, and that probably means that there's more refrigerant sloshing around in the system than there ordinarily would be, and that might have an impact on whether we see some of that pre-stocking going on towards the end of the year. Yes, I'm afraid I wish I knew. but I think if I knew where refrigerant prices were going to go, I'd probably be able to predict the stock market too. And if I could do that, I wouldn't be here. I'd be sitting on a yacht in the Caribbean.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we need at least a guidance, which is what you've given us, John. So thank you. The another one in line with that is do we think that the F-gas review is going to see even tighter restrictions on GWP and that sort of thing? Graham, do you want to answer that very briefly?
I don't.
What's your feeling?
So there's a lot of kickback in Brussels at the moment about the fact that there's still a lot of illegal refrigerants, and the fact that the tightening of the phase down has already had a massive impact on the increase of illegal imports. And I think the Commission are aware of that, so I don't think they will match at this stage. I think they may change move the goalposts again, though.
Undoubtedly.
Andrew, can I come in here? The Commission has to adjust the quota step down to bring it in line with the Kigali Amendment. So for the next 5 or so years, F-gas is actually running ahead of Kigali, which is okay. But in the latter part of the F-gas regulation, it actually gets behind.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So there will need to be some adjustments to the step downs.
Okay, literally 2 minutes before I have to wrap up. So this is a bit of an invidious question, but I'll do it anyway for Graham, which is, but what about, and this is 3 questions in one, but what about enforcement? It's all very well us doing the right thing, but those transport guys, filling gap here, cold room guys, high street guys, are just like the Wild West. So what's happening about enforcement?
Well, we're working with other certification bodies now to try and standardise our approach to it and make sure that it's all more effective. Working with people like Wolseley, with the REFCOM Elite Supplier Scheme, for example, to help all of the supply chain understand what they should and shouldn't be doing. And I have to say, Wolseley have been very proactive in that. Robert's team on the F-gas compliance, for example, I work very closely with them on a regular basis, and other suppliers that are joining on board with that. All helps to level the playing field. And what the Environment Agency has said to me is that they know that if companies like that are being audited by us, and they are being audited by us, then that frees up their resources to concentrate on the sector that is the bane of all of our lives, which is the online illegal sales. But the Environment Agency don't have the resources to deal with that at the moment. And that is something, again, that we are addressing with DEFRA on a very regular basis. It's
that old adage of the industry needs to point out where it sees things going wrong, and they can contact you at REFCOM, and that's the best way of doing it at the moment. Self-policing is the only way we're allowed, really, given the government has got other things on its mind. We have run out of time. I was going to just shout, the one thing I was going to say in response to John Ormerod was to flag up what we should always be saying, which is don't forget the importance of reclaimed refrigerant in this whole F-gas discussion, because that is a key. When we're talking about short-term measures, a key part, we have until 2030 to use reclaimed refrigerant. So that is
absolutely, Andrew. And just one very quick point on that. There was a question about the future of 410A and should people be looking at retrofitting 410A? Reclaimed 410A is going to be part of the future. I know one of the major aircon manufacturers actually has a line of equipment that is running that is based on reclaimed 410A. We see reclaimed 410A being available for 10, 15, 20 years. So it's part of the future.
A key last message there. So we've had an hour and a half. It's flown by, hasn't it, gentlemen? So it remains for me to thank you all for providing your wisdom. Thank you to the audience for questioning in your tens and hundreds, almost. Felt like hundreds. It wasn't quite hundreds, but lots of questions. as I say, if you want to email anything specific hasn't been answered, we will try and get them to these folk. I think this slightly stripped down version of debates has worked well. So well, in fact, that we're proposing to do another one, and you will be fascinated to hear, audience out there, that we're planning to do one on CO2. So we're providing the yang to the yin of the A2Ls, I think. There, we're what's the phrase that we always say? We are refrigerant. I was going to say ambivalent. That's not the right word, is it? Refrigerant something.
Refrigerant neutral.
Refrigerant neutral. There you go. Falling apart on my wrapping up lines, which means that the YouTube will look rubbish for me at the end there. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for listening, everybody. The recording will hopefully go up on YouTube before too long when we've edited out my bluffs. But yeah, thanks again to all of you on the panel. And as is traditional with a Zoom webinar, it will just end and we'll all be left staring at a blank screen. So thank you very much for attending, and we'll put the recording up as soon as we're able. Thanks very much. And thanks to Wolseley for allowing us to put this on.
Thank you, Andrew.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Andrew.